Hey, I'm Casper and welcome back to Unleashed Dog Training. Today what we're going to go over is going to be the Garmin Sport Pro and the receiver, and we're going to show you guys how the conditioning works for these two devices. So this is sold in one set, so you get both of them as one piece, and then from there what we're going to look at is there's so many different ways of how to use them, and there's not really a right or wrong way to actually use it. It's just a matter of how to be able to tailor it to exactly what you need for your dog. So the first thing that we're going to look at is just the device itself. The device is fairly basic, and the way that it's going to work out is it has a couple of different things on it. So the first thing that it has is going to be a toggle switch. And that toggle switch is what's going to allow you to change from different dogs that you are controlling. So right now we're utilizing just the black receiver. So I can upgrade this unit so that I have the ability to have a black collar, a red collar, and a blue collar. Or if you want, you can change those to any colors you want. The only problem there is then you have to remember what you've done on your transmitter to match each one of those colors that don't match the actual toggles. So let's get back to this. So we have our toggle switch, 1, 2, and 3 positions. Now, I always recommend that if you only have one dog on your system, only use the top one and don't play with that toggle switch. If you start playing with the toggle switch and you only have one dog, what you do end up doing is you start wearing that toggle switch in, and you can take the risk then of potentially being on the wrong dog or the wrong collar. And if you only have one, there's really no need to break that toggle switch in. But if you have multiple dogs, the first thing I tell people is break your toggle switch in. Make sure you're playing with it. Go back and forth. Go up and down. Make sure that you're wearing that in just a little bit so that it's easier for you to get your selections down. So the next thing you're going to notice is you have this massive spin dial. I love the analogs because of the fact that there is that spin dial. I can always look at it and know exactly where I am in position with that dog at all times. So I know that wherever I'm at, I can turn and I can roll it down, and I'm going to hit that lock button. I'm going to go from the lock. Now, in lock, nothing works. Then I can go to auxiliary. So auxiliary is a cool little feature. The way that auxiliary works is it gives you a whole nother set of button loadouts for the same buttons. So the first thing that we're going to look at on this one is going to be going from the auxiliary settings, where you can go into the bark limiters and then also the flashlights. These are your auxiliary modes. So the first thing we're going to do is go to auxiliary and then press that bark limiter on, and then it'll start flashing. It can either time out and then it will send the signal over to the collar, or it will time out by us pressing it again. And that again sends the signal over to the collar. The actual receiver is powered on by a black button on the inside here. Just press and hold it for a second and it'll pop right on for you. Make sure you let go and then it'll turn on. If you hold it, it will power cycle through, and it allows you for pairing, so that way you can pair the devices if you need to. Once we have everything set up as far as the pairing goes, you're going to notice that we have a green light. That green light is going to tell us that our battery indicator for the collar. Once that green light goes to yellow, we know that we're low. Once it goes to red, we know that it's going to die soon. So we got to get it back on the charger, preferably before it turns yellow, but at least when it turns yellow. These do have about a 3-day battery life, but we want to make sure we take them off every single night so that they don't cause pressure wounds. And I've always been told that shock collars are going to burn your dog. Well, there's not enough power to arc anything from here to here. There's not enough power to actually burn your dog with this. So With that, a lot of this comes down to just human error. It's us forgetting to take the collars off the dogs at night. It's us forgetting to take the collars off the dogs for days or weeks at a time. And that's typically what we end up seeing when we start seeing these wounds that look like burn marks. And they are pressure wounds. Easiest thing to do for a pressure wound is just clean it really, really well and let it air out. Now, if you see that there is an infection there, then absolutely get the dog to the vet. But for the most part, if you can catch it early, all you have to do is clean it out and you'll be good to go. But they do happen, and it's not something that an e-collar is physically capable of doing, is burning your dog. We're going to go back to our transmitter. So on our transmitter, I'm going to again press that bark limiter on. Get to the right dog here. Bark limiter on. And then I'm going to press it again, and that collar is going to turn blue. So by having everything set up that way, where I can press that bark limiter on, and then press it again, and everything sends over, and now I've got a blue light showing me that it has accepted it. So those are one of the big things that I want to make sure that they happen. If I don't see that blue light come onto here, I know that it has not transferred over, and I know that I'm not in bark limiter mode. To take it out of bark limiter mode, all I'm going to do is press the next button down. It's going to say bark limiter off. I can press that button, and it's going to immediately send that signal over. So there's nothing else I have to do. I don't have to press it twice. I only have to press it that one time, one button push, and it's going to send that signal over to make sure that we turn that bark limiter off. One more good thing is don't leave your bark limiters on if you're not going to use them. Go through, put the collar on, turn your bark limiter on when you're about to leave the house, and then when you get home, turn your bark limiters off. If there's no need to have it on, don't keep it on. All right? I see a lot of people that will leave their collars on all day long, and it's not really a beneficial thing. So make sure that if you're using the bark limiter, turn the bark limiter off when you don't need it. But if you're going to send the dog out in the backyard and it's an excessive barker because it barks at everything in the backyard, you may want to turn it on for that. So those are some things to consider. The next thing that we can go into is going to be the light. So we're still in auxiliary, and what we're just going to do is we're going to come down here, and we have the light on, and that will turn on our LED lights, which made the mistake of looking straight into this the first time. Don't want to do that. They're quite bright. Then we're going to have light off. So those are going to be our functions as far as the auxiliary functions. So we have the bark limiter on. Press it again to confirm. When we're done with it, we're going to press bark limiter off, and it's going to transfer that over and turn it off. We have our flashlights on, the lower left, and then we have the flashlights off on that lower right. So that gets through all of our auxiliary modes. Once we get through the auxiliary modes, then we're going to go into the stimulation modes. Now, stimulation can go in a lot of different effects. Stimulation is not always a bad thing, and people have to understand that if you're shocking a dog, a shock is not necessarily a taser. And so many people are thinking that you're doing this taser concept, that these have so much power to them that they're going to knock the dog on their butt or anything like that, and it's really not true. So when you look at a shock collar, most of these, when you put them in your hand and you turn it to a low setting and you press the button, you can't feel it. And that's the weird thing, is so many people that I've gone with, I've actually given them these units and I've said, here's the collar, here's the device, put it in your hand, I want to let you feel this, and then when I shock them, they have no idea that they're being shocked. So just because we hear the words shock collar, don't think that it is a taser. totally different things, all right? There's not enough force or electricity going through this to really make a matter as far as that goes. The better thing that I can explain this as is it's going to feel like a medical grade TENS unit. If you've ever used one of those, or if you know anybody that uses one for any type of muscle issues, those are probably the easiest way to explain to somebody what these work like. So if you want to turn it up a couple, you can go through and you can feel it until, so that's a 3 right now, and I'm just barely feeling a slight tingle. And that tingle that you're going to feel there is going to be the idea that there's a pulse of electricity going through. And again, it's a very, very low level of electricity, and we control how much actually happens. So every single thing that the dog does, we want to make sure that what we're correcting them with, the intensity fits what the justification is. All right? So we're not going to get into a whole lot of the science portion behind training today. I really just want to cover conditioning. And I'll also cover, obviously, the collar itself, because you shouldn't have a collar and not understand how to use it. And that's one of the big things, is I want you guys to understand at least the button setups and what they do and how they work. So once we go to the stim levels, now this is where things change a little bit. So it doesn't matter what my stim level is. It can be a 1 or it can be all the way up to a 10. But as long as it's on stim, now we're going to have these different settings. So I have a continuous shock, the momentary shock, the vibration, and then the tone. So those are the big ones that I have. And I really have to think about how I'm using these. Continuous shock is going to be a pushing or pulling type of correction. So if I need to pull the dog back to me because it's running away, or if I need to push the dog off of, let's say, the couch or the countertops, those are going to be good continuous corrections. Then we go to the momentary corrections. Anytime that you would snap a leash for the collar or yell at the dog and say the word no, anything like that is going to be a really good idea of when to use the momentary button. Then we're going to look at vibration and tone. Okay? Vibration is not a correction. So if I look at the vibration and I hit that buzzer, that is not something that's going to make my dog stop doing what they're doing permanently. And I say permanently because they may for that moment, but they're not going to do it for a long-term effect. So vibration, we can teach it as a command. I use it for deaf dogs all the time, and it becomes their name. So the other idea is going to be then the tone button. So that sound we teach to our dogs to mean come, or as a recall. So when you start looking at the idea of how you can utilize these commands, vibration and tone both work off the idea that I can use vibration to mean one command and I can use tone to mean another command. When we get into vibration and tone, there's a lot of things that can fall into place here. So a lot of people I hear that say that they want to use it as a warning. I don't believe in that at all. I don't believe that shock collars should have a warning. Dogs really in general for training should not get warnings. It's either right or it's wrong. So it's either going to get a reward or it's going to get a correction. So those are the ones that I really like. I'm not going to warn my dog that he's getting too close to the street and then have to try to correct him as he's about to get hit by a car. I'm not going to play the game of warnings. You either did it right and you can get paid for it, or you did it wrong and you'll get corrected for it. So that's simple. So take away the vibration and the tone as warnings. Turn them into commands. I can use vibration, that means go to my wife, and I can say tone, which means come to me. Now I can send my dog across the entire house to the other person. There's a lot of fun things that we can do with this, but you have to understand how the actual command sets implement as well. The idea behind all of your intensities, make sure that you understand that when you go through an intensity, I always recommend feeling them first. If you have not felt your intensities, then it gets into the idea where you can overcorrect or undercorrect depending on the situation. So if I have a dog that's starting to run away from me, but I've never played around with actually figuring out what my collar is able to do, or even what the dog's baseline is, I may start off and that dog may end up only getting, let's say, a 2. If he gets shocked on a 2, that may scare him, and then he can continue accelerating through and then end up running into all kinds of other issues. When we look at dogs that get different types of collar corrections, or where they get warnings or anything to that degree, if you overcorrect or undercorrect your dog, both of those are actually wrong. We have to figure out the baseline first. The baseline itself is going to be really far after we get the conditioning done. But we do have to figure out the baseline, so that way we don't overcorrect or undercorrect. We only want to give the exact amount of correction needed at that exact moment. No more, no less. We don't really want to play with the numbers slowly going on up to make sure that we can get just that right amount, but also we don't want to start really, really high and then have to work our way down. So it's imperative that you understand how the collar works and actually what the sensations are, and then also how your dog reacts to it. Because if I have 4 dogs, all 4 of those dogs are going to react completely different than each other. So I may only need a 1 on one dog and I may need a 5 on the other dog. But the goal is always to get to the least amount of force necessary, which would be, in our case, a 1. So if I can get down to that 1, then it's perfect. I want to work in my 1s and my 2 ranges. I don't want to be up in my 5s and 6s. If I'm up in my 5 and 6 range, I'm doing something wrong because I have not taught the dog what the collar actually means. Again, the devices are amazing. I highly recommend, if you've never felt one, put one on your hand, feel it at the low levels. The 1s and 2s are where we want to work. Mine goes to 10, so about a 3 is where you start to get into the higher levels. So 1s, 2s, maximums of 3s, those are good numbers to be working with. Put one on your hand, ask to borrow somebody that you know, or come to a class, let me know, and I'll get you one of mine and you can feel it. But if you think that these are barbaric tools that don't deserve any credit, I guarantee you that if you start to look at them and you start to give them an open mind, idea, and attitude, you will see a completely different dog and a safer dog as well. Other than that, guys, I'm glad that you were here. Take care of yourselves. Again, if you have any questions about remote collars at all, any brand at all, let me know. I'll walk you guys through them. I'll help you out. So please let me know if you have questions, and I'll help you out anywhere I can. Otherwise, we'll see you guys in the next videos, and check these out as well. Take care.